Hey, what is up, everybody? It is Wednesday, May 15th. I had to look at the date because I totally forgot. And there's been some interesting stuff in the world of the Division 2 this week. We got Title Update 3 yesterday, which I had some fun in it, right? I checked in. My build got better, so I'm super happy about that. I know a lot of people kind of bummed out. Didn't turn out so well for them. But ultimately, it was good for me. So that's all I can say about it. I am primarily a PvE player, those of you that know that. But, which is why the other excitement that came down this weekend, or this week, was super exciting. And that is that we got the raid tomorrow. It is going live. Tomorrow is the 16th of May. It's going live at noon Eastern time tomorrow. And a lot of people were super, super pumped up and excited about it. They launched a trailer for that raid, which got people even more excited overall. It was a pretty damn cool trailer. It had a lot of cool stuff. I'm going to play it right now for you so that you guys can see it and see why everybody is kind of excited and super pumped up about it. Now, that excitement, or that trailer got a lot of people pretty damn excited, and I think for good reason. It looks really, really cool. It looks like it's going to be a ton of fun. I know a lot of people have been really excited for this first raid in the Division verse, right? This is the first time we've ever gotten a raid. They've talked it up. They've said it's not like incursions, that it's much bigger, more depth, everything else. So there was a ton of excitement about it. However, that excitement was kind of tempered for a lot of people because with this also came the strange decision from Massive that they announced there would be no matchmaking in game with this raid. And that has spawned a ton of debate, discussion, bitching and whining. Let's just be frank about it. And some of it I think is definitely justified. Some of it is absolutely terrible. Anybody that logged in to watch the state of the game today and that watched chat probably wanted to just turn off chat and never go back to it, right? It was just constantly people going on and on about it. And like, look, I get it. I know a lot of people are bummed out about it. If this was me of 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would be complaining also. Luckily, I'm kind of in the position now to be able to put together a group easier, right? 8-person raid group is not the easiest for most average gamers to put together. But we'll get into all of that stuff. One of the biggest reasons I've seen, and honestly, one of the most valid, I think, that people are upset, is this graphic that Massive used when marketing their game pre-launch. Now, you can see it says right there, matchmaking is provided for every game activity and difficulty level. I remember when that came out that I got super excited for what that meant for the raid in particular, because they'd also talked about the raid and all of these other things. And in my opinion, it's a pretty big dick move by Massive to pull that away. This it should not have been pulled away now, this late in the ball game. If they weren't going to have matchmaking, I think that they should have divulged this information a long time ago. But waiting until the day or two before the raid launches to let people know about that is, in my opinion, a really, really big, pretty bad move. And I think a lot of people do have the right to be upset and to be mad about that. A little bit about my own history with raids in particular. I have a MMO background, right? I started with Star Wars Galaxies, moved on to Age of Conan and Star Trek Online, and a bunch of other games, and I raided in all of those if they had raids. I was in guilds, clans, things like that, but those were all on PC, right? Which generally have a social structure built into the game itself. Where you don't really necessarily, back in the day, they didn't even have matchmaking for those. But it wasn't a big deal because you had your raid, or I'm sorry, you had your guild, and there was that social structure was built into the game itself. That is not the case with these looter shooter hybrid games that are largely on console. They're on PC also, so I don't want to say that like one presence should be more important or have more of a presence. But those kinds of social constructed like forums aren't necessarily in the game itself on a console. It's just not possible. We kind of have it with the clan system, but even then it's nothing like what a PC brings with an MMO. And so when I transitioned to more console gaming and I got into Destiny, I remember playing Destiny 1 for a year before I ever raided because I couldn't get groups. Like I didn't have enough friends that played Destiny. The people I did know that played Destiny had quit long before I was ever ready to raid. And when I had tried LFGs, I either didn't have a Gallahorn, so I couldn't, or I, wasn't geared enough, or I didn't know what was going on. And midway, through the first fight, they didn't want to teach it, so I'd just get booted. And there was a ton of negative experience with that. About a year into Destiny's, it was after Taken King. I ended up joining a clan or guild, and those guys raided, and so they took me along. They were super cool. They were able to teach me whatever, but I still had to do that outside of the game itself, right? Those sources for friendship, matchmaking, whatever, do exist. They are there, but it's more difficult to find. And even then, the first step of just getting into them can be kind of difficult, and just not a pleasant experience, to be honest. So that's me. I personally, I'm going to say right now off the bat, I think matchmaking should be in the game for this raid. Not only because it was promised, but because of some reasons that we're going to get into later on. But I just want to get that out at the very, very beginning. Now, I do want to reach out to the people that are saying that they're going to quit the game because of this. I have to say, I mean, you are more than welcome to do whatever you want to do with your game time, right? You have your time that you choose to spend doing whatever you want to do, right? If you want to spend that time playing video games, cool. If you want to spend that time playing The Division 2, cool. If you want to spend that time playing Fortnite, cool. But no, honestly, like however you want to spend your time, it's your time. Spend it however the fuck you want to spend it. But I personally think that's kind of a dumb reason, especially if up till 2 days ago you were enjoying this game. Even if you're looking forward to the raid, I get that. But if you were enjoying this game 2 or 3 days ago, and this decision for some reason, or this choice by Massive for some reason causes you to want to cancel the, like, stop playing the game, I mean, I guess that's your choice. Personally, I just kind of think it's dumb. But I do know people that like quit playing the game because, their extended mag got cut down by 20 rounds. So if you are going to quit, that sucks. Hopefully they add in matchmaking later. And if so, I hope to see you again in the game at some point. Because I do think, I will also state this right now, even though matchmaking is not in the game at launch for this raid, or in the game for this raid at launch, I should say, I do believe that they will put it in eventually. Some of the things they said during the State of the Game today led me to believe that. I think that was always the plan. I just don't think they counted on the backlash that came down today. And ultimately, if that was the plan to put it in later, I think it was a super poor, ridiculously bad decision to take it out now. But so that's that. Some people are saying that matchmaking shouldn't be in the game because it is an elite end game activity and shouldn't have the matchmaking in it because that's part of the game is having the friends and coming up with the group. Cool, I get that. I also think that's kind of a dumb excuse. It is an elite end game activity. No, I do not believe everybody should have the right to play it. Right? The people that are gonna say, "What about the solo players?" Fuck you. Like honestly. Raids are not for solo players. They never should be. So I'm not going to that extreme. However, I do believe that there should be a step of accessibility for players that play the game primarily solo to be able to find people to play this activity with relatively easily. I don't think I have never been a big fan of any system that forces people to go outside of the game to find people to play the game with. I believe that should all be included in the game itself because it just makes it feel more immersive, right? If I have to spend my time going to Discord or going online to, I don't know, some forum or something like that, or an LFG group to try to get a group together and then go back in the game and then try to add them to friends and then go back into this other thing and be like, oh, wait, maybe I mistyped it. Oh, no, there it is. Okay, no. And then go back. It's just a hassle. It's a pain in the ass. And ultimately, most people aren't going to jump through those hoops. So in trying to figure out whether or not it should have matchmaking, I was and even what should or should I not make this video? I made a list of pros and cons, and it was pretty funny because ultimately I came up with like 3 or 4 pros, and then I was like cons. No, uh, maybe. No, and I legitimately could not come up with any cons. I ended up getting into a few discussions on Twitter, found a couple pseudo cons, but to me, those still don't justify why matchmaking shouldn't be in the. But anyway, the pros. It was promised, and in my opinion, if a developer promises something as important as that, they should stick to their word and keep it in the game because that is a massive selling point for people, especially PvE minded. Raid is a PvE activity. Solo type players or people like that tend to stick with smaller groups. An item like that is a huge selling point. Especially when the other games in the looter shooter genre tend to not have matchmaking for raids or for super high end content like that. A second pro is that choice is good, man. Ultimately, whether the experience and there's some arguments to be made against matchmaking that have like negative experiences, blah blah blah. But ultimately, whether that experience is good or bad for the player, I believe that the true power lies in that choice, right? The player wants to have the choice to whether or not engage with matchmaking or not, or going outside of a game to find a raid group or not. And that choice should belong to the player. It should be an option. I don't know why it's not. And again, there's not one good reason why it shouldn't be. Ultimately gets more people involved and excited in the end game, right? And ultimately for this or any looter shooter type game to succeed, they need people invested and excited in the end game of the game itself, right? And in what that end game has to offer. And the end game in this, yes, there's a ton to do in the open world, blah 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 blah, but we're already seeing unrest. We're already seeing people being bored with the content in this game, and the raid offers, hopefully, a never-ending supply of something to do, right? Whether you're going to Sherpa other people or whether you're just going to one and done it or whatever, it still adds more, or it still gives people a bigger and better reason to be invested and involved and excited in this game moving forward. I also have the belief that even if it's a bad experience, right? Even if somebody match makes and they get with a group of douche nozzles, or they get booted at the boss, or something like that, right? Because there's always going to be trolls. There's always going to be shitty people that want to ruin the experience for others. But even if you have a negative experience like that, good can come from it. I remember in the Riven raid, when that first went live with Destiny, I got with a couple of groups in the first few runs. People didn't know what they were doing. I did try LFG. I actually got matched with people that had no communication whatsoever. But ultimately, even in those few runs, when you go in and you see it, you kind of get an idea for the mechanics. Even if nobody else is doing what they're supposed to be doing, you kind of get an idea. You drop group, you bail, you go through the process again, you go back in and you try again. And ultimately, it can lead to, learning more over time, helping out other people. Maybe you kind of get the feel for it. You meet a couple people during that experience. You teach them, they teach you, and then you move forward. And then maybe ultimately you turn into a Sherpa yourself through that experience. And yes, that experience is possible through LFGs, but it's way more time consuming. And ultimately, I believe the negatives of that time consuming LFG experience is worse than the negatives that could come from a match made experience in the game. Matchmaking can be a tough experience. It absolutely can be. But it can ultimately lead to, the best end game of all for people, which is, ultimately friendship. Sorry, that was a dig at Luke Smith and Destiny 2, but as a joke. But the point is solid, right? Like ultimately, if you matchmake, even if you have a bad matchmaking experience, and maybe you get matched with 7 people, nobody has mics, whatever, and it's in game, you matchmake, maybe you wait for 5 or 10 minutes, something like that. You get in, you find out it's a shitty experience, boom, you back out, you go back into matchmaking. Maybe this time you get 6 people that don't have mics, but one does, and you're like, hey, dude, I want to do this. Anybody on mic? Hey man, I'm on a mic. I want to be able to communicate. Nobody else does. Cool. Let's back out and then us group up and then go back into matchmaking. And through doing that, you kind of put your pieces together and maybe ultimately you come up with, your own raid group and then you can try it. And that experience, while possible through LFGs, takes a ton longer if you're going to different discords trying to get those groups just to ultimately have shitty experiences, or going to an LFG and then having to wait for the queue to pop, and then you get into the queue and then somebody's like, oh nope, you don't have this piece of gear, bye, blah blah blah. So ultimately, again, I just think it's a positive thing. Cons, it took me forever to come up with anything. I know some people that are against matchmaking go on and on about Discord LFGs, other ways to group up. And again, from my own personal experience, I think a negative experience with those forms of matchmaking is far more negative than in a bad case of matchmaking, right? Generally, matchmaking is quicker. So even if it's a bad experience, you can exit that experience and re-enter it quicker and more repetitively, and in my opinion and in my experience, more success than with LFGs. Now, I will say there are some really good Discord groups out there. There's some really good LFGs, and ultimately, you can have really, really great experiences first time on. So, like, as of right now, I'm going to say with matchmaking not in the game, that's your best option, man. Find some of those good LFGs. Find like the Division Discord, join those. You can join my Discord, whatever. Like join in, and hopefully you can find a really good group, and hopefully it's a positive experience, and hopefully you can find some people to raid with in the future. The only kind of close viable argument against matchmaking that I have heard is that a bad matchmaking experience could lead to people being frustrated and not wanting to try to raid again. And I get that sort of. I kind of get that, right? If somebody match makes and they do have that really bad experience, and they could just be like, man, if I get rage quit and never go back. I get it, but that's going to happen whether it's in matchmaking or whether it's an LFG or whatever. That's on the individual player type and like the mentality of that player than it is on the way that the match was made in the first place, right? Whether it was in game or whether it was through a third party app or website, like that's going to happen regardless, because that's just the type of player that player is. It's not pro or con for matchmaking. That's just the type of player that is. And I still believe that with fewer hoops to jump through, ultimately matchmaking would be a more positive experience than anything outside, than any kind of third-party app or website. So, as we come to the end of it, Massive made the decision because they said today on the State of the Game that they believe that the planning, grouping, building of the teams before going in, and like the building of your builds before you go in, should be vitally important, especially during this discovery phase early on, where nobody knows what to expect. And I agree with that. I do agree with that. I think it is vitally important. It's why today, when I finish this video, I'm going to be in the division. I'm going to be grinding out some last minute gear. I've got my LMG damage build, but then I'm also going to put together 3 sets, 1 for each of the gear sets. I'm going to put together a healer build just so that if we do get split up or whatever, my group has at least 2 healers. I'm gonna put together multiple weapons of different types so that I can toss those into the build I'm already using, into my main build, in case I need a sniper, in case I need an assault rifle. Like, that's just stuff I'm going to do, but that's me. Not a lot of players are gonna do that, right? So I get where Massive is coming from on that, because I don't believe most players are gonna do that. I'd like to think that they would, because that's why we have multiple loadouts and things like that, but they probably won't. And so I get that. But again, choice. The players should have the choice whether or not they're going to what level of bullshit they want to deal with, right? And if you get into a group that everybody's, DPS and nobody has made those plans, then cool. The player can just choose to back out and try again and roll those dice. Ultimately, I would rather have a roll of the dice than to just stand on the outside of the craps table watching everybody play, even if that means that if I play, yeah, I could lose. I could lose some money. I could have some bad experience, but I would rather have the choice of whether or not I wanted to pick up those dice and roll, as opposed to like walking into the casino and somebody saying like, oh, guess what? No, man, you're by yourself. Nope, you can't go play craps today. This is a group only crap table. Yeah. They also said that communicating, planning, executing, as well as like trial and error and things like that during the raid are going to be required and are super important, and that many matchmaking groups won't be able to do that because a lot of people don't voice, whatnot. And I get that. Again, that's a valid reason why match-made groups would probably fail, but I don't think that is at all a valid reason to not have matchmaking as a choice or an option. I just don't get it. Even if, matchmaking were in the game, yes, I think everybody knows that most match-made groups are going to fail and fail hard. Most players aren't going to have a mic, or they're not going to have patience, or they're going to go in, they're going to expect a quick wipe or a quick clear, and if they don't get it, within 20 or 30 minutes, they're going to back out, they're going to quit, and then you're going to have to matchmake somebody else. Most matchmade groups are going to be like that, and I think most people understand that process. But again, at least the player that gets into that match-made queue has the choice to do that. And I think ultimately that's what's important. They'd at least get to try. They would at least get to feel included, and excited to explore the new content, perhaps even in a terrible run, to meet that one other player that maybe had some cool ideas and was communicating, and then those people, like I said before, match up, they get together, that snowballs, and perhaps that team eventually gets to actually make a run in the next raid for World's First. I know it's a crazy thought, and it's probably a snowflakey SJW flower child hippy dippy way of thinking. But in like, we all want to be included, and I don't think that's the case. But I do think, ultimately everybody wants to feel included, right? In anything that they do, they want to feel like their time matters, and I think this is just a huge misstep on that end. So there's my reasons. I think there's a lot of reasons why matchmaking is a good thing. Some arguments to be made for why it can be negative, but I haven't heard one compelling argument for why it shouldn't even be an option, right? So far, I've heard a lot of people talking about the good and the bad of matchmaking, but nobody has been able to give me a concise and clear reason why it should not be an option in the first place. Because those negatives that people are mentioning, in my opinion, are far outweighed by the positives, and the positive possibilities that could come from it being in there. So thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate your guys' time watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the like button, subscribe, like all that shit. You guys know all that. Thank you very much. I hope to see you guys and continue this conversation. Please, please, please. I made this video not so much to try to convince you one way or the other, but more because I'm actually kind of fascinated by this discussion. And in things like this, when I have a very set opinion on one side, I really do kind of want to hear the argument that's going to change my mind. And so I want to hear it. I want to talk about it. Leave comments down below. When I'm streaming tomorrow, come on in on Twitch. If I stream tonight, whenever I'm streaming, the link's down below. Click the follow button. That way you can catch me whenever I'm live. And come on in and engage with discussion. Let's talk about it. Like that. This is how we all grow. This is how our minds get new ideas, is by talking about things and trying to see things from the from another perspective that maybe we weren't aware of in the first place. So please, show me a new perspective. I challenge you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I love you guys. You guys rock. I will see y'all later. And until I do, keep on living the dream.